Okay, so thanks a lot to Katie for the introduction. Thanks a lot, Jishun, for inviting me. So what I'm going to talk about are editorial careers and also a little bit more writ large what's going on in science publishing. All right, let me see if I can move slides. Yeah, so a little bit of context. I run a journal, scientific journal that is called iScience, is the one that you see with the green cover down below, which is encased within Cell Press. Cell Press is the publisher of, first and foremost, Cell, and then besides that, many other titles, first in the life sciences for a few decades, and more recently, I would say in the past 10 or something like that years, we've branched out in several other disciplines as well: chemistry, energy, material science, sustainability, what else? Data science. There's a whole bunch of them at present. A little bit of context here. So Cell Press is an old science publisher at this point, and it's this little square, little rectangle that you see here, bottom right, which is encased within a bigger orange rectangle, which is Elsevier. Elsevier has a bunch of different divisions. So one division runs journals and books, which you're probably more familiar with. But on top of that, it also has medical information and scientific, technical, and information analytics. What does that mean? I'll show you in a little bit. This orange rectangle is encased in its own right in a bigger, quite a bit bigger, white rectangle, which is called RELEX, which also on top of the scientific, technical, and medical information analytics also has divisions that deal with risk and also legal information analytics and exhibitions. So RELEX is an information-based analytics and decision tools for professionals and business customers. Sounds like quite a mouthful. Basically, what does that mean? It means that we combine information, and information means also both data as well as stuff that we publish through our journals, our books, and so on and so forth, or that we source from our sources, as well as analytics, which means algorithms to give information to people who need very precise, very tailored information. Right? So the journal that I run is called iScience, and I here stands for interdisciplinary. We really like interdisciplinarity. That's not all we publish, but we try to bring together folks who might see different sides of the same community, and they might not talk to each other already. This is something that we like quite a bit to shape the community. We work in really all sorts of areas of science. I mean, the cover that you see down at the bottom left is about a paper that we published on embodiment of prosthetic limbs, for example. So, really, really interesting stuff, if I say so myself. So I'm an editor, but who are editors and what do they do? This might be a little bit more obscure, right? So if you are publishing scientific papers, if you want to get your research out of the lab and in front of other people, generally you want to get it vetted first, and by vetting it, I mean running it through peer review. Peer review generally means journals, scientific journals. So what does the peer review process look like? Well, it looks like what you see here, cartoon in the cartoon, and the editor is the first guy on the right, the one with the sword, right? Everyone here on this road is going to try to chop your paper to bits, right? In order to make it better in a friendly way. jokes aside, where do the editors come from? And then I'll tell you a little bit more what they do. Generally, they come from the lab, from a variety of places, I would say, as well. I mean, there are people who come to an editorial career straight out of their PhD. Some have done a postdoc, some have been principal investigators somewhere. Others have come from industry, for example. There's quite a bit of a variety, I would say, of extractions. And why do they go into being editors? I would say that the biggest motivation is because they're tired of seeing a very, very narrow chunk of research for a very, very long period of time, and they want to make an impact in a different way by seeing a bigger variety of topics, and not necessarily being the ones who are publishing the research, but helping to shape the community a little bit. And generally, they're quite happy with the choice. So what do we do? Well, part of it I've already mentioned. We run peer review on scientific papers, but there's quite a bit more to that, I would say. We don't just sit there and wait for papers to come to us. We also go to conferences and continuously have an outreach programs to scientists, to get to know scientists, to get to know what they do, to discover new and exciting communities, new centers, new events, and figure out also to shape the community as well. It's between the journal and the scientific community, there is a push and a pull, right? The scientific community shapes the journal, and it goes the other way around as well, that the scientific journal to some extent shapes the scientific community as well, which is really interesting. And then on top of that, especially in my respect, but I mean, I would argue with respect to all editors, there is also a business aspect in what we do. So an editor works generally for a publishing company, for a commercial company, or for a society publisher as well. There are several of those, for example, American Chemical Society, American Physical Society, and in the life sciences, there are several ones as well. So generally, journals to survive over time for years, they have to be profitable, right? Because otherwise, at some point, things that are not profitable, somebody has to foot the bill eventually. And so there's some really interesting dynamics there as well with respect to the stuff that you want to publish because it's interesting, and the stuff that you want to also bring into the journal because you know they will attract readers, because it will attract other authors as well. And on top of that, one of the things that I do, that I've done through my career, has been to start new journals. Quite frankly, that's the most exciting bit of my job. I find that to be really cool. Why? Because it's really working on a startup from scratch. You're figuring out what is that is missing in the literature. What is the product that you need to bring to light to capture a certain chunk of the market that is missing, that others are not serving, or that are not serving well. So you're trying to solve the problem of a chunk of authors who are not satisfied, I would say, with their publishing avenues, right? And then you get to translate this idea into a reality, and a reality hopefully that will make down the road a few $1 million, which would be quite good. And then you also get to hire a number of very smart people, smart PhDs, generally, who will help you bring that vision to reality. I find that to be particularly exciting. And I would say that especially within my journal and especially within Elsevier, there is an element of data analytics in what we do. I was saying earlier that one thing that we do is discovering and building communities. What you see here on the left is a plot of the papers that we published, shown on a circle that has around it the shorthands are for various subject areas. So comp is computer science, math is mathematics, physics, and so on and so forth. And so you can see here that various dots tell us what we published, how much we published, and the dimension of the bubble tells us how much we published in different areas. And then we have software that allows us to drill down exactly, into which areas we published in, how many citations they got, and how does that compare, for example, with the rest of literature. We can look at our competitors. We can look at funding streams, for example, to see what's coming down the pike. The data analytics activity is, in my personal opinion, really exciting, and it's definitely a future for editorial activities. So what is life like for an editor compared to a researcher? Some differences there. So the number of tasks are many, and I mean, if you are not careful in saying no, you have to be really good at saying no, because there are a lot of interesting things that you can sink your teeth in. For example, aside from evaluating papers, you can also organize webinars, you can organize conferences, and you can run special issues, for example, around a certain particular topic. Many things that you can sink your teeth into. Whereas a researcher generally has a few bigger tasks for a much longer period of time, right? Because generally your projects tend to run for a longer period of time. The knowledge depth is quite different. So a researcher will know her or his narrow area very in depth. Perhaps this person will be one of the few real experts of that specific, very specific area in the world, whereas the editor has a much more broad scope knowledge, right? With respect to myself, I mean, at this point, I work in a very broad scope journal, and over time, I've handled science in all sorts of disciplines. So I like to say of myself that I am mile wide, inch deep. It's both a pro and a con, right? In the sense that you have to be careful when you talk with people who have a much higher depth in a certain area than you, that you add some value, but at the same time, you can add value with respect to making connections between different areas that they really might not know anything about. So it's a fascinating dynamics, I would say. The range of topics also is inversely proportional, and generally you're really in this constant outreach mode, trying to get to know more scientists, more communities, and seeing new science as it's being created, which is really a fascinating process. One of the most interesting things personally that I find in my job is going to visit labs and seeing what's being created new in in research teams. Often these visits involve meeting in one day 6 or 7 research groups, and I mean at the end of the day your head explodes, but you've had a lot of fun, definitely. And generally there's also a different direction of bringing disappointment. The editor brings disappointment to others in terms of rejecting the research papers sometimes, whereas the researcher has it the other way around, right? So I was saying a little bit about the variety of stuff that there is in a company like RELX. And here I'm going to zero in a little bit more on Elsevier, because it's probably a little bit closer to everybody else's background, scientific and technical. And I'm going to leave risk and law analytics and exhibitions to the side. So for example, within Elsevier, we have about 2,500 journals. And so many of them have publishers who work on liaising between academic editors and the business aspects. So that's one role that we're always after. And then we have 2 big clusters of what we call in-house editorial. So people like me who are employed by Elsevier to actually run the entire journal from on the business side and the editorial and scientific side. And those 2 big clusters are Cell Press, that works in the life, earth, and physical sciences, and then the Lancet that works in the medical sciences. The Lancet is one of the oldest scientific journals that there are around. It just celebrated its 200th anniversary. And then on top of that, there are a lot of different aspects that perhaps people might not be aware of. And those other aspects have to do with technology and with product. So I said at the very beginning, we are a data analytics company, and perhaps not surprising, we have data analytics products such as Scopus, which is a database of scientific publications, Scival, which is a front end to analyze the scientific publications, Pure, which is repositories of publications or preprints for each institution, Digital Commons, which is preprints, fund institutionals to monitor funding streams, data monitor, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole variety of possibilities and opportunities within this bigger umbrella that is RELX, and I would definitely encourage you guys to go and look at what kind of jobs opportunities there are, and otherwise just send me connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to help you explore the opportunities. And with this, I think that I am done with my presentation, and I would love to hear your questions.
Yes, please feel free, unmute yourself. Yep, and we have the email here in the chat. And so I guess I'll start by broaching a question that Lean also brought up before our meeting. So can you talk a bit more about how much you hire outside of the life sciences, and, what are the skill sets that you're really looking for students both in the life sciences and outside the life sciences?
Yeah, so Cell Press started as a life sciences publisher. As I was saying, for decades, it was a purely life sciences publisher, but we branched out about 10 years ago. And so the team that I personally run is in the physical sciences and earth and environmental sciences. So the folks who work for me are either PhDs or have postdocs in one of these areas: chemistry, materials, energy, environmental science, environmental microbiology, for example. We also have a volcanologist most recently.
Awesome.
And what am I looking for in these folks? Well, so there's a lot of things that I can teach you when I hire you. The one thing that I cannot teach you is the love for science. If you don't have a passion for science and you feel really excited about seeing new science, talking with scientists, then it's maybe not exactly a good career for you.
Mhm. Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. So do you hire people who need an H-1B sponsorship?
No, not at the moment, but we hire in a whole lot of different countries that are not the US as well. So you might want to consider that too. Yeah, at the moment, it's quite difficult to get sponsorships through in the US.
Mhm. And while we're waiting on potentially any questions in the chat, I found it very interesting. Oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
Yeah, my name is Shakti Swaroop and I'm a postdoc at Brown.
Mhm.
And I come from India, and I just have one question regarding the career aspects. So I am mostly doing a lot of interdisciplinary research. Like I did my master's in nanotechnology, and then I moved to materials, did work a bit, and then into like aerospace applications. So I'm wondering, like, if I have to take up I have to look at like which kind of journals would like be potential for me to apply job to. And as I'm from India, I'm sure like there are I just went through, and there are like a lot of editorial roles in India as well, but I'm not sure like which typically which journals would be fit me more suitably.
That is a good question. It really kind of depends on what you want, really. And I'll be more than glad to take this conversation offline as well.
Okay.
So it depends if you want to work at a journal with a broad scope, or you want to work at a journal with a narrow, more community-based focus, I would say. So that's going to depend quite a bit on that. Or if you want your interdisciplinarity to be
Yeah.
hard.
So I want to like sort of work on a little more broader spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, there are, at this point, there are a lot of broad scope journals. I mean, the one that I run is being one. And so there's always more need for people who are generalists, I would say, in this sense. So yeah, both within Elsevier and within our organizations.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe I will send you an email if I have more questions. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
of course.
Okay, in the chat, we have another question. So for your job application, do you normally require a CV or a resume?
I would say it doesn't really make much difference. What I really want is that your passion for science shows.
Mhm.
Often we're hiring for specific openings in specific areas, but not all the time. We also have a program within CellPress that we call Editors of the Future, where you can put your resume, and then we'll do a pre-screening, and then we'll bring you back when we actually have we'll fast track your application for future positions as well. And so what I really want is to see your passion for science, the fact that you've been productive in whatever you've been doing, because obviously that's important for us, because the role of an editor is, I would say, quite time constrained. So that there's a lot of stuff to do, in a certain limited amount of time, and so we want to see that people can handle it, I would say.
We have another question. So Alberto wants to know, what does a typical working day look like?
So there is no typical working day, I would say. I would say that half of the job is looking at the science that comes in spontaneously through the door, and the other half is going to look for the topics and authors and so on and so forth, which you want to publish that don't come in spontaneously. So in one half of the job, I would say you're using your scientific expertise to judge manuscripts that come in. So you read papers, you liaise with scientists, and you liaise with reviewers to figure out things that, for example, perhaps holes in a certain manuscript that you need to understand, and you need to have external experts as well helping you to assess that. And the other half of the job is to getting stuff in, as I said, that might not come in through the door otherwise, right? So going to conferences, reading other publications, reaching out to people, a lot of reaching out to people, and convincing them to why should they publish with you as opposed to somebody else. What can you offer them in terms of topics that you can publish, in terms of community, in terms of eyeballs on their publication, in terms of reach of publishing with you as opposed to somebody else, which is also an interesting problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question from Julia. So what kind of technical skills or experiences do you look for in editorial candidates?
That is a great question. So let me tell you what the hiring process generally looks like with us. So generally there is a preliminary interview that is sort of attitude based, and to understand also what the interest of the candidate is. Then there is what we call a manuscript test, which takes a couple of hours of your time. You get to play editor. So you have an hour to read some manuscripts, and then another hour to talk with us about what you would do with those papers if they were submitted to your journal, which is a really cool thing to do when you've never tried it, because it shows you a really different way of doing things as opposed to when you're a researcher, and then some more in-depth interviews, right, for people who make it. So with respect to technical skills, I don't think that there are specific skills that we're looking at. We're looking at scientific skills, especially if we are hiring in a specific area. So I mean, if we want a molecular biologist, obviously we want someone who has a certain body of work in that area. If we want a material scientist in, for example, soft materials, then we're looking for someone who has done work in that particular area. But with respect to other technical skills, there isn't anything specific that I would say that we're looking at. It's what usually I'm looking for people to be able to argue their point, make their point across, also being able to do outreach. And so, I mean, it doesn't hurt if you're someone who can actually be social. That doesn't hurt. Lately, if someone has a penchant for data analytics, that's something that, in my personal opinion, is a plus. But not everybody feels that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question just came in. So are there, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of internships, so it's a yes and no. We have internships within our news department. So that's another thing that I would like to highlight. That's quite a different job with respect to being an editor. It involves, as I said, working in our news department, which does a lot of press releases, for example, and we have a summer internship program there. And several other people who have worked there have actually come back to have permanent roles. Within our editorial department, we have, as I was saying earlier, a talent pool, but not an internship. The talent pool, what it entails is that you submit your CV, and we have pre-screening with a couple of steps of the interview, and then when we have a job in your specific area, we call you back quickly and we fast track you to hiring.
Cool. Very cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, your contact information has been shared, so you may get some follow-up emails.
That's good.
But if that is it, thank you so much for a really informative session. I appreciate it.
Of course, and thank you so much for staying up until 6:30.